All right, so as you guys know, Anna Kasparian and Dave Rubin used to be extremely good friends at the Young Turks. That is obviously evidenced by how much time they spent together. You can check that out. And Anna Kasparian had broken her silence at the time and went off on Dave Rubin because he essentially sold out to the Koch brothers and he turned into being this sort of libertarian shill, if you will. And she went after him, man. She really called him out. She's gone after him actually on multiple occasions, not just one. And it looks like Roaming Millennial, I'm sure you guys know who Roaming Millennial is. She made a response video to Anna Kasparian and the Young Turks going after Dave Rubin. And my understanding is that basically Roaming Millennial and Dave Rubin are at the very least friends. They're definitely sort of they work together. They'll go on each other's shows and different stuff like that. So there's sort of a desire to support Dave Rubin there, which is fine. But I'm going to let the video play through and then we're going to talk about it.
I think that it's incredibly important to fact check the people that you have on your show. And that's not because I'm a fan of arguing or debating with your guests. It's just important that if you have a platform and you're allowing someone to say whatever it is that they want to say, you don't want half-truths, misinformation, lies to get out there in the public. But there's this whole notion now that it's a very intellectual thing to just allow people to come on your show and say whatever they want without challenging them. That's what real journalist is. I mean, that's a real intellectual. No, it's lazy. It's because you don't know anything. It's because you're nothing more than an intellectual lightweight, okay? And a perfect example of that is Dave Rubin.
From that, I think it's pretty easy to see what Anna's main problem with Dave is. In this video, Anna takes some cheap shots at him, like calling him lazy, because according to her, he asked for a six-figure salary, which she thought was too high. Sorry, Anna, call me a dirty capitalist, I guess, but according to Patreon, I don't think it's really up to you or the Young Turks at all to personally decide what Dave Rubin's time is or is not worth. And Anna also accuses Rubin of dishonestly embracing libertarianism because of money allegedly from the Koch brothers. An interesting claim from someone who's partnered with the Qatari state-funded Al Jazeera. So yeah, those little digs are there, but at the core of her issue with Rubin, I think, is his interview style. Obviously, I think the fact that Dave and Anna used to be friends and colleagues probably contributes to some of the ill will that Anna at least certainly feels toward Dave. But even more than that, I think Anna's outrage at Dave's pro-dialogue stance is just par for the course when it comes to the neo-progressive social justice, whatever you want to call it, desire to control the narrative and demonize any attempts to converse with or understand your opposition. And look, the reason why I wanted to talk about this and respond to these videos isn't because I just wanted to do the female equivalent of white knighting for Dave Rubin. Okay, I mean, yes, I am a big fan of his. He's been on this show and on my YouTube channel before, but Dave's a big boy. He's got a heck of a platform, one that makes mine look itty-bitty, frankly, so he doesn't need me defending his honor or anything like that. And frankly, and I think a lot of people would agree with me, that Anna's personal attacks that question his work ethic and motivations are so petty and unsubstantiated that they don't even warrant a response anyway. But still, I wanted to talk about this because the idea that being curious about something or someone and wanting to know more about it or them necessitates that you be on the opposition the entire time and constantly refuting any wrong thing they're spewing lest you be deemed complicit in their heresy is ridiculous, and it's a viewpoint that I've heard more than enough times in response to my own interviews. You see, I, like Dave, appreciate interviews where I get to learn more about the person being interviewed. Hopefully that includes questions they've never been asked before, questions that will help the audience learn something new about them and better understand their worldview, right? Because I feel like if I'm interviewing someone or if I'm watching an interview someone's given, whether I agree with them or not, I want to hear their perspectives, not the interviewers. And that's not to say that I don't like discussions or debates, formats where there's more of a give and take between both sides. That can be useful too, of course. But at the end of the day, if you do just want to understand someone, then yeah, listening to them is really the best way to go about it. And I know some people now might be saying, whoa, Anna didn't say she's against interviewing certain figures, only that people have a responsibility to correct factual errors when they are presented by people on their platform. That's not being anti-interview, right? Well, sure, that may be what Anna said, but is that what she meant? Based on this next clip, it seems like no, it's really not.
But the reason why I have such a huge problem with Dave Rubin is because he's had Milo Yiannopoulos on his show twice, hour-long interviews, and Milo was able to say whatever he wanted to say without any pushback from Dave Rubin, including anti-Semitic remarks. Here's an example.
Let me take the ultimate example, what remains the big taboo in society, which is anti-Semitism, right? Most of the Generation Trump, the alt-right people, the people who like me, they're not anti-Semites. They don't care about Jews. They may have some assumptions about Jews. They may have some prejudice about Jews, like the Jews run everything. Well, we do.
I don't even know where to start with that, so just go.
We do. It's a fact. This is not in debate. It's a statistical fact. You know, Jews are on most of the banks. Jews completely dominate the media, vastly disproportionately represented in all of these professions. That's just a fact. It's not anti-Semitic to point out statistics.
Dave Rubin sells it as, I'm far more intellectual, and as a result, I refuse to engage in a debate or an argument. I allow people to make their case on my show. No, you're lazy. He was lazy when he worked here. He's lazy now with his ridiculous show where he proves time and time again that he doesn't know anything.
First off, what Milo said, who is Jewish, by the way, was not anti-Semitic. He even explained that himself, that pointing out statistics and facts is not anti-Semitism. So the idea that Rubin should have pushed back on his guests, truthfully pointing out that, yeah, Jews are overrepresented in certain fields, I mean, what? Well, why? I mean, Jewish people are the second most educated religious group right after Hindus, plus they have the highest average IQ of any group. Good for them. Why is that wrong or hateful to point out? Should we be mad at Pew's statistics now? If I, for some reason, ever end up on the Young Turks and point out that pro football and basketball players are, yes, disproportionately black, is Anna gonna accuse me of being anti-black? And if she doesn't push back on my statistical truths, would she then be culpable in my anti-blackness as well? Seriously, what the hell is this argument? Also, it should be noted that this particular interview with Milo is from March of 2016, which is over 2 years ago. Back then, the alt-right as a term and movement was much more ambiguous than it is currently, and people, including Milo, were using it to mean what's referred to now as the new right. The alt-right wasn't inherently and always about white nationalism like it is now. Just thought I should mention that in case anyone thought Milo was actually coming out as a white nationalist and anti-Semite, because Milo says a heck of a lot of things that I would never say myself, yes, but he's not a racist and he's not an anti-Semite. People like Anna might believe, well, if he says such questionable things, why interview him in the first place? Do you just invite whoever on to interview? Are you fine with these despicable views being shared on your platform? But I think that really speaks to her inability to see the other side fairly.
Yeah, I'm fucking better than you. Yeah, I'm fucking better than you. Okay? Much better than you.
Even though Milo may have different opinions than Anna, and heck, even Dave, it's not up to them to legitimize him or not. Milo, especially during the election year, was a prominent commentator because many people liked what he had to say. He isn't and wasn't just whoever. If there's a figure who's grown a huge following independent of mainstream media support, doesn't that make you just a little bit curious about them? Again, you don't have to agree with anything they say, but don't you at least wonder why people seem to be so drawn to them? And yes, you are allowed to talk to someone you disagree with without actively and aggressively constantly rebutting every single thing they say, just so you can get your virtue signal out there and make sure people know, hey, I don't agree with this. If all the people Rubin ever interviewed were like Milo Yiannopoulos or only alt-right, alt-light, or new right figures, whatever you want to call them, and all of them were only ever making comments about Jewish people, then fine. Maybe the, hey, I'm just interviewing them, these aren't my views shtick might seem a little bit forced, right? But if you follow the Rubin report at all, you'll know that Dave actually gets a variety of guests on. Left-wingers, right-wingers, atheists, Christians, Muslims, ex-Muslims. In fact, the only thing most of the people on his show have in common is that they're free speech supporters most of the time. It's almost as if, spoiler, Dave Rubin is passionate about free speech. Funny that. Also, I don't know when Dave has ever tried to position himself as better or more intellectual than anyone else, or when he's dismissed the utility of debate. It's just his main thing is that he's an interviewer. I don't know why that's so hard for some people to get. Who knew that interviews with popular figures could prove to be so very controversial? But in a follow-up to this video, Anna actually released another rant about Dave's apparently faulty moral character.
You might disagree with my views or think my presentation style is too progressive or aggressive or unsavory at times. I think those criticisms can be valid, and it's my responsibility to learn and do better when I'm wrong. But my motivation is to do the right thing and tell the truth. I know better than anyone else that sometimes I make mistakes, but I can confidently say that my political views are never influenced by a profit motive. That same cannot be said about Dave Rubin. He has partnered with Learn Liberty, which is funded by the Koch brothers, in addition to Prager University, and boom, he's suddenly a libertarian thinker. My accusations about him being lazy are evident in his lack of intellectual curiosity, which translates to a level of ignorance on a wide variety of issues.
What really bothers me in political discourse is when people choose to attack you personally instead of going after your ideas, your policies, your content, whatever it may be. And based on these videos, that seems to be exactly what Anna's MO is. She can't just accept that Dave no longer lines up with her ideologically and prefers a different interview style than she does. No, he has to be lazy, intellectually lacking, and dishonestly funded by the Koch brothers, who are now apparently controlling his narrative. I mean, really? I know there's a personal history here, but still, why you gotta be like that? Now, after that clip in the video, Anna does go into some substantive criticisms about Dave's positions as a libertarian, and she uses examples of him talking about the post office and building regulations specifically. I'm not going to go into that because A, I'm not a libertarian myself, I'm a small government conservative, and yeah, those two positions have a lot of overlap, but if they're within reason, I don't actually have a problem with things like safety regulations, so yeah. And B, that's the kind of criticism that I actually think is legitimate. Okay, so Anna Kasparian thinks that libertarianism, and more specifically Dave Rubin's take on libertarianism, is problematic. Fine, criticize his ideas, have at it, that's okay. That's the meaningful exchange of ideas that I think Dave Rubin is actually advocating for, not these ad hominem attacks. But I'm just so sick of the idea that if you sit down and listen to someone, if you engage with an idea, a person, one time, that means you're complicit in their worldview, even when the entire portfolio of your work outside of that one video would say otherwise. It's not being lazy to want to sit down and hear what someone else has to say. It's not being intellectually lacking to know that you don't always have to be on the opposition. And it's not being dishonest to be better at making money than the Young Turks are.
So Roaming obviously went a bunch of different ways with this, but she starts out by saying that, it's not up to the Young Turks to decide how much his time is worth. But what Anna Kasparian is speaking about is how much his time as a show was worth at TYT as an employee of the Young Turks. So isn't it by definition the valuation by the employer, how much the employee is worth, as Dave Rubin being an employee and the Young Turks being his employer? I would think that's pretty definitional, but I want to say this. His show was a half an hour show per week, and the thing about Rubin's show is he doesn't really add any actual value to his show. It's entirely based on his guests and what they say. Because what he would do essentially is bring on guests, and that was sort of the show. So what makes the show? Dave Rubin and what he said? Nothing. None of that. It was about the guests. And his show was essentially, at the time with the Young Turks, it was abysmal. It was definitely nothing to brag about or anything like that. And so what she's trying to explain is that he wanted a six-figure salary for a show that was a half an hour once a week, and it's an independent news company, so they don't have that kind of money to pay. And so what she's trying to explain is that he went and decided that he could make more money if he switched his ideology. Now, you can say that, oh, that was a good money decision, but nobody's talking about that. We're talking about is the dishonesty that is displayed by Dave Rubin when he, spews what he says. It's crucial, it's vital, it's extremely important to know whether or not the person is being honest when they're saying what they're saying. Because if they're not being honest, they're not even real. They're being fake. And we've heard a lot about this from Blair White. She just talked about it. She just came out talking about how most of those people in LA are fake, right? Most of them are fake, and Dave Rubin is in LA, and he's one of the people who had her on his show a bunch of times. I don't know about a bunch of times. I know at least once. So there are very good odds that it's Dave Rubin, and we know a lot about, what he's done. And then she says that she says alleged ties when we know it's not alleged. He has a partnership with an out-and-out Koch brother funded libertarian offshoot of the Institute for Humane Studies, Who sits as the chair on Learn Liberty? Charles Koch. Learn Liberty is an out-and-out libertarian think tank. And it's not just Learn Liberty that's, the only libertarian Charles Koch brothers funded think tank out there. They have a crap ton of them. They have an insane amount of those think tanks, and Dave Rubin is a beneficiary of one of those. So to act like it's alleged and you're sort of just dismissing it because he now agrees with what you say and you really don't care whether or not he sold out, it's BS. It's wrong. It's not right. It's not just alleged. It's fact. We know what it is. And then she sort of invokes the partnership between AJ Plus and the Young Turks, which I guess is Qatar funded. That, even if that were true, which I don't know, maybe it is, maybe it's not. Two things on that. One thing, it wouldn't make her wrong. It would just make her a hypocrite. So let's say Dave Rubin is a sellout. Just like hypothetically, I guess the Young Turks would be sellouts and getting funded. First of all, they wouldn't be the same, and I'll get into that in a second. But it wouldn't make her wrong. It would just make her a hypocrite because Dave Rubin would still be a sellout. But B, the really big difference is there's not really anything wrong with getting funding from groups, I guess. I mean, I don't really have a problem with that because when it comes to news media and commentary and things like that, there really isn't much money in it, to be honest. A lot of it relies on advertiser funding and funding from people who watch. So, I mean, getting money from big donors or whatever donors, I don't really have a fundamental problem with that per se. The real issue here with Dave Rubin is that the reason why he changed his ideology was because he knew that he could make a bunch of money doing that. So it's not like he actually believes what he says. It's essentially just putting on an act. He doesn't care what he's saying. He's just BSing his way because he knows that's how he's going to make money. So if someone gets funding from from big money, it's not necessarily fundamentally a problem. It's just that we know that he's actually changed his ideology, and to say that the Young Turks changed their ideology because of this like double leveled funding that they're getting from Qatar because they partnered with AJ Plus, that would be hilarious because Cenk Uygur was on MSNBC prior to that, and he was obviously very left wing, and there's no evidence that anybody on the Young Turks switched their ideology because of money, and that's really where the issue comes in the first place is, are you saying what you're saying because you really believe it or not? That is the question, and Dave Rubin is very clear out and out that is simply not the case. And so it's really not all that, it can be important, okay? I'm not trying to completely dismiss it because I think it can be important where the funding comes from. And it is important, but it's not fundamentally a problem per se. Just like when, Ben Shapiro's website is owned by the Wilks brothers, who are also, I believe they're frackers, just like the Kochs, and they're billionaires, and they're Bible literalists, by the way, so they believe everything literally, which is crazy. But I don't have any questions about whether or not Ben Shapiro is a conservative and believes what he says. I believe that he does believe what he says, so it doesn't really impact much at all that his funding comes from the Wilks brothers because he hasn't changed his ideology because of it. And again, Dave Rubin, on the other hand, we know what's going on. And then she throws in the sort of SJW buzzword, the social justice buzzword, and this is sort of her forte, I believe. I believe her forte is sort of not really talking about serious policy discussion where, I don't think she's breaking down stuff talking about I don't even know if she would, be talking about the Mercatus study that came out, which is a libertarian think tank, by the way, Koch-funded think tank that came out saying that, Medicare for all would save us $2 trillion over 10 years. And, it's because of administrative cost savings. And, I don't think she's talking about free college education and how the military raise that we did in 2018, if we had used that for education instead, we would be able to fund it for 10 years. I don't think she's really talking about stuff like that. Not really about a living wage and the numbers and things like that. This is more her forte, and she's more in that realm when it comes to political talk. It's more about these social justice warriors, look at these feminists, look at these blankety blanks. That's kind of her thing. So she had to throw that in. SJW, social justice warriors, is completely irrelevant to the topic at hand of whether or not A, Dave Rubin is a sellout, B, Dave Rubin's interview style is garbage, which, by the way, there's a YouTube channel called Counter Arguments. He made a video that totally made sense to me, critiquing his interview style. And he is by no means a lefty. He's made videos going after the same people that Roman goes after, which are SJWs. So it's just, it's just BS. It's BS. Using this sort of SJW buzzword is very, very embarrassing. Very, very embarrassing. And, oh man, she says she's a fan of Dave Rubin. Like, what is there to be a fan of? Like, why would you be a fan of Dave Rubin? I don't really understand that at all. And she says unsubstantiated claims. Like, come on. Anna Kasparian and Dave Rubin were really, really close friends at the Young Turks. And so the idea that she doesn't know what she's talking about, especially when we know we see that he had a half an hour show where it was mainly based on his guests. And we know that, he switched and he started getting Coke funding, etc. So we already know about all of that stuff as well. And then she says, like, she strawmans. The strawman is that, Dave Rubin has to be an on-point, impeccable, just crazy, unmistakable machine who rebuts every single statement that is uttered by the person. That is not what she's saying at all. She's saying, if you're going to extend your platform to people like this, you have to check them, okay? And I'll give you a good example of his failure of a complete fail of a interview style. This guy named David Horowitz comes on his show, and he legitimately calls President Barack Obama one of the biggest milquetoast neolibs. His cornerstone policy, Obamacare, is a mandate. It is a literal mandate to purchase from private insurance companies. He called him a communist. This is a guy who had record private sector gains, record private sector employment gains, record stock market gains. In communism, there is no private sector. And I shouldn't even have to utter those words that, to rebut him being a communist. But Dave Rubin should have questioned him that immediately. He totally should have been questioned 100%, but Dave Rubin just let it slide by, and it was sort of like nothing. So it is a complete straw man. And then she goes into the Milo Yiannopoulos thing. That's sort of a weird topic area that I'm not really all that well versed in, and I really find it to be mostly irrelevant in the first place. But even if I were to grant you that, there's no way to be able to speak about all the other ones that are actual issues, because the whole Milo thing, like, the dude's just a troll. And so it's hard to take him seriously. And also, again, that claim doesn't really have to do anything with policy positions or gauging, anything political, really. It's sort of just this weird demographic issue that's super, I don't even know, the JQ or whatever the fuck, I don't know. But a more legitimate thing would be talking about David Horowitz, because he's making a political analysis of Barack Obama being a communist who's our president of the United States. So even if I were to grant you that, because you don't seem to rebut any of the other instances, there's no way out of that hole. It's just completely impossible. And then she states that, Dave Rubin has on people from all over the spectrum. This is a gross misrepresentation of his show. If you go through his video list, the amount of left-wingers on there is so minimal, it's laughable. It is absolutely laughable how many lefties are on there. In fact, most of the recent lefties who really go on there are Eric and Brett Weinstein, and that's sort of because they have like this intellectual dark web tethering going, so it's not even like you're getting different lefties on. And Eric and Brett are definitely not as vocal as people like Ben Shapiro and Jordan Peterson are, and there's not many Eric and Brett Weinstein fans as well. Like, I respect them. They're smart guys. They're good guys for the most part. I don't know all that much about them, but they seem to be respectable at least. but they don't have like rabid fan bases, or I don't even know if there is someone who's like, I'm an Eric Weinstein fan, whereas, you know, you've got a whole cult following for Ben Shapiro and Jordan Peterson. But the actual amount of lefties that he brings on is laughably small. And funny enough, Anna Kasparian herself has offered to debate him at Politicon and to go on his show. She has not gotten a response for obvious reasons. And Sam Seder has been talking about going on his show for a long time. He's invited a debate with Dave Rubin on his program. He's also offered to go on Dave Rubin's program, open and out, to go on his program. Yet he refuses to have him on. I'm sure Michael Brooks would be completely down to do it as well. He's purposely dodging these people, not having them on his show, which it's unethical. It's hilariously stupid to set up this idea that, you know, oh, he has people from all over the spectrum on his show, and then conveniently leave out all of the people that he, first of all, that his lineup is massively skewed to the right, which is fine. That's fine. If you want to have a show and be an interviewer who adds nothing of substance, and you are somebody who wants to just bring on right-wing people, I'm still not okay with the not checking them. However, if you want to just bring on right-wing people, that's fine. Go ahead, you know, it's your show. Go ahead, bring all right-wingers on. I have no problem with that. Except when you claim to be somebody who wants a free exchange of ideas and somebody who claims to bring on people from all sides, don't try and explain to me that you believe in and support, and the entire purpose of your show is a free exchange of ideas and an open-ended conversation, and I want to hear from all sides. Don't make it up if you're not actually doing that. That's my issue. If you want to bring on all Republican right-wingers, go ahead. That's fine. I mean, it's your show, man. Go ahead, do that. You can choose who you want to bring on, but don't pretend, don't act as if you want a free exchange of ideas and an actual conversation, because it's very clear that all you want is to bring on right-wingers and just give them a monologue. And it's hilarious. So I can't stress enough how important it is to understand whether or not people believe what the fuck they're saying. If they don't believe what they're saying, I don't take them seriously. If they are just spouting what they're saying for cash, I'm not going to take them seriously. And we just saw what Blair White said. I want to repeat that. Blair White has exposed those people. And Dave Rubin is one of those people that she described. She described people in LA who were doing their shows, who was basically explaining that, you know, I don't really have problems with trans people. They don't really believe what they say. Dave Rubin is absolutely 100% no doubt one of those people. And he has been exposed just like a bunch of the other people doing that. So, and it's just, I want to repeat again, you know, last time. He's not really wanting a real exchange of ideas because he refuses to have on Anna Kasparian and he refuses to have on Sam Seder. So why lie? Why lie? I don't understand that even in the slightest. But to pretend as if Dave Rubin is A, not a sellout, B, really cares about a free exchange of ideas, and C, his interview style is good, holy crap, you're an idiot. And I'm not trying to throw ad homs here either. Actually, probably shouldn't have said that. But anyways, the point here being, I think that Romy Millennial has a sort of desire to defend Dave Rubin because they are sort of business partners, almost, not directly, obviously, but you know, they have a sort of, you know, I go on your show, you come on my show, and it helps both our shows out type of relationship. And so she is sort of refusing to be critical of his interview style or the authenticity and the genuinosity, I don't know if that's a word, or genuineness of his ideas and what he supposedly believes in. So a lot of these claims are just BS and false, and I don't think that this defense was all that. I didn't think it was, you know, it didn't even really defend anything that defend Dave in any way. It was sort of just kind of this deflection almost. But let me know your thoughts on this down below. You know, it's pretty interesting.